Welcome to the Global Wellness HQ family of podcasts. We are your international headquarters for resources and ideas and insight in relation to the 9 elements of holistic wellness. Join us as we interview local and international wellness experts and learn how you can implement and improve one element or dimension of wellness at a time. Our experts will share their practical tips on wellness in one of these core areas: emotional, intellectual, occupational, physical, environmental, financial, spiritual, social, or habitual. We created our family of podcasts as a resource for anyone who is looking to integrate the 9 elements of holistic wellness into their daily lives. Welcome to the show.
Everyone, welcome back to the show. I'm excited. I have my friend Shana Francesca here with me today. Shana, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Hi, yes. So I am a scholar of intentional and ethical leadership and living. What does that mean? I teach people what is it to be an intentional and ethical leader and an intentional and ethical human. The foundation of my work is curiosity, respect, and accountability, and how those three things work together hand in hand to have us build an intentional and ethical relationship, because that's what life is all about: our relationship to each other, our relationship to the living world. And leadership is a relationship, right? And so my work seeks to reconnect us to that and to really show how powerful that can become. Because when we embrace leadership as a relationship, then there's life there. Now your organization becomes a bubble of life, right? It becomes an ecosystem. It operates as an ecosystem, which is what community is, which is what relationship is. It's reciprocity, right? So that's what I do.
Now, could we back up half a step because I want people to understand. I think the two key words I pulled out of that were intentional and ethical. So,
Yeah,
what did those two words mean to you? And then we're going to go on tangents and have some fun.
sure. So if we take a step back into my life and how I got here, I was born into an abusive household and raised inside of a religious cult. And so I experienced from the beginning of my life almost all encompassing, entirely encompassing, what intentionally harmful leadership looks like, what what it looks like when we neglect to understand that we are meant to live in reciprocity with one another within an ecosystem, when we forget that our life and all life is part of an ecosystem. And because of how much pain and trauma it caused me and the people around me, when I left at 26, I began to ask the question, how do I show up as human? Because I hadn't been taught how to show up as human. I'd been taught how to survive within capitalism. I'd been taught how to survive within an abusive system, within, an abusive household, an abusive religious environment, right? So I had no idea who I was and what was possible for me as a human, for me as a leader. And so I dove into all of that research and understand those things better. And what all of it came back to, whenever I looked at leaders who were doing incredible things and had cultures that people really loved being a part of and stayed long term as a part of, and that were driving innovation and creativity, the thing that they came back to was was curiosity, respect, and accountability. And for me, the part that makes relationship ethical is the accountability piece, right? Because if we're in a relationship with someone and we aren't interested and we are avoiding taking responsibility for the impact of our actions, that becomes abuse, right? When you continue to harm someone, whether your intention is to harm them or not, doesn't matter. You are harming them. And if you are refusing to take accountability and acknowledge it, right? Not just acknowledge it, but take accountability for it, then that is an unethical relationship, right? Because now and especially when it comes to into play with a leader, because now there's a power differential there, right? And so that person doesn't have the same level of power you have. And so now you have something that's the person who doesn't have the power, right, is now having to bear the brunt of this harm, and doesn't have the ability to speak out against it. And so it's for us as leaders to say, no, it's going to be my responsibility to invest in relationship ethically and to make sure that I'm taking accountability.
Of that. Now, you talk about ecosystem, and by the way, that's one of my favorite words because I think, you know, we have to I homeschooled my kids, and I think that was grade 5 science, but I love the concept of ecosystem because
Yeah,
it shows our place in the environment around us,
yeah,
but it also
yeah.
puts certain responsibilities on us. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm like, I know that anybody watching this can see that I'm looking away, but it's because I want to bring up National Geographic's um, definition of an ecosystem. But I'm just going to paraphrase it instead of looking it up. But essentially, what it says is, and I'm obsessed with this. I'm gonna nerd out for a second. Is that it is a geographic area where plants, animals, and other organisms live together, sharing that space and working together with the landscape and the weather to form a bubble of life. Now, when I'm talking, I know, right? Oh, it makes me so excited. When I found that definition, I was like, oh yeah, love that. Bullseye. The purpose of leadership is to create a bubble of life, right?
Yeah.
That's where innovation comes from. That's where creativity is born. Creativity drives innovation, right? And if you have a group of people who are honored and seen and valued, and where you're seeking to understand them and empower them to bring their whole selves, that's a bubble of life. That's driving creativity. That's driving innovation. That's driving profitability, right? And that's going to drive a culture where you get to hire the best of the best and they stay around, right? So, like, it just makes good business sense to foster a diverse, because a bubble of life requires diversity, a
Yeah.
diverse bubble of life.
I love that. And I think that's kind of a lot of people want the homogeneous, there is no diversity. And
Yeah.
yet in nature, the best environments, people, plants, animals, people thrive on diversity.
Yeah. There is no homogeneity in nature, doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. There is no life there, right? So when we would see a homogeneous state, it's typically an indication of death. Something has died, right? It's returned to base elements, right? So, yeah, life requires diversity. And so, whenever I see an organization that is valuing their comfort, right? Because that's ultimately what it comes down to. When we aren't investing in diversity, it's because we are upholding our right to comfort, right? Over anything else. And it
Well,
is the kiss of death.
honestly, how do you innovate? How do you diversify? How do you adapt when everybody looks, acts, talks, behaves the exact same? Is that fair?
Right, exactly. You won't be in a position to pivot as the market does, as your clients, because your clients aren't necessarily um, stuck the way that you are, right? As an organization, they're going to continue to move and grow in this world. And you might have served a purpose at the beginning, but are you still going to be able to fulfill their needs if you're not even interested in what their needs are, if you're not connecting with them in new and diverse ways, if you're not, you know, understanding the world from different perspectives, right? And that's what diversity does. It allows us to bring together, because each one of us has a very specific sliced view of the world, right? And when we recognize that, especially as leaders, we recognize that we have a very limited view of the world, and that will be the kiss of death for our business if we do not expand that worldview, right? And so your people that work with you help to fill those gaps of what you don't see or understand about the world. And if they're people who see and understand and have experienced the world in exactly the same way as you have, um, the world's going to shift and change, and you're going to get left behind. And we see organizations where they get to a place and they're like, well, and by the way, once you realized by the point you realize that your clients have left you behind, it's already kind of not too late, but darn close. And for some, it is too late, right? Because by the time you catch up, everybody else is still moving forward, right? And so you're catching up to where they are now, but they're still moving forward. And so you're going to be playing catch up for a really long time.
Well, and I think that's an absolutely, we're going to talk about your 3 elements of curiosity, respect, and accountability. But before we get there, I think the reality is, in olden days, let's say pre-social media, as
Right.
my kids like to say, the old days, Like, ouch.
Ouch, I know. I was alive well before social media.
Total tangent, but I joked with one of my sons that he was going to be grounded for something, and I was going to take away his internet and his technology and devices. And he was like, "Oh my God, that's terrible. That's barbaric." And I'm like, "Dude, that was my childhood."
Right. What are you talking about? I was like, my parents would be like, go outside. My mom had a giant brass bell, and she would be like, when you hear the bell or the sun goes down, you get your behind home. You know what I mean? And literally, literally just, running around the neighborhood. We weren't allowed to leave the neighborhood. We weren't allowed to leave our couple of blocks, without permission, but we were just like in the woods, just like whatever, climbing trees and stuff
Yep.
in random people's houses.
And you didn't come home a minute before sunset. It was like, what are you
No,
doing home?
no. Yeah. They're like, did you want to help with cooking dinner or setting the table? You're like, absolutely not. No, I'm gonna go back outside. Thanks.
I hear somebody calling me. I'll be back.
Yeah, I think Sandy wants me to come play.
I forgot to pick up my bike. I'll be right back. Yes.
Right, right, right.
So let's talk about, and by the way, ecosystem and community are two of my favorite words. So
And
let's
they're the
talk
same
about,
thing.
we're going to nerd out on this. So let's talk
Yeah,
about curiosity, respect, and accountability, because I
yeah,
think a lot of people listening to this think they know what those words mean, but
yeah,
I hate the
yeah.
phrase curiosity killed the cat. I just
Me
feel like
too.
that's what you mean, because I'm curious as can be, and it's like,
Right,
but
right, exactly. Yeah, and so what's interesting is we all have our own definitions of words, even though there's agreed upon definitions of things, each one of us experiences the words we use and uses them in very specific ways. So in all of my talks, because I'm a keynote speaker, in all of my talks, I'm very particular about defining these things to make sure we're all on the same page before we kind of dive into these conversations. But the thing that I remind people is curiosity is the basis of all relationship. Knowledge, learning, friendship, you name it. It's all requires relationship. And we cannot build relationship with something or someone we are not interested in learning about. Right?
yeah,
And so
can't.
like curiosity is required for a relationship. If we are not interested in learning more about the person, we'll just stick with people for this moment, the people around us, then we aren't actually in relationship with them, right? That doesn't mean we aren't in control of them, right? But we aren't in relationship with them, right? And so we really need to ask ourselves, and if we are in control of them rather than in relationship with them, especially as a leader, that is a dead culture, right? If we keep in mind the whole purpose of this to create an intentionally create a bubble of life that drives innovation and profitability, relationship is required.
I love that bubble of life. That I'm
I
on
know.
board.
I'm obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with it. And I can't not show it in my talks. I'm always like, guys, here comes my very favorite definition in the whole wide world.
Right. So people watching this, you know exactly what you're going to get with Shana and I. Shana, let's
Right.
talk about your speaking, because I think, it's important. I love the background, but let's talk about your speaking, because I
Yeah.
think knowing what you do is probably very powerful for people watching this. So what do you love to talk about, and where are you usually found talking about these things?
Yeah. So I love to talk about, I have four main talks at this moment, and I'm always open to creating another one for someone. Um, is My main talk is Mastering Intention, Designing Your Life, talking about what is it to be an intentional and ethical human, and how does that revolutionize our life, our relationships, provide us joy and a sense of fulfillment. Um, my leadership talk is called Intentional and Ethical Leadership. I have a talk, a deep dive on curiosity, because it's like one of my very favorite things, called Cultivating Transformational Curiosity. And I'm currently developing a talk right now called Neurodiversity in a Singularly Focused World, because I am a neurodiverse human. And for those that don't know what that means, that covers the spectrum of autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and dyspraxia. That's currently what's under the umbrella of neurodiversity. Although I think everyone's kind of, there is no such thing as neurotypical. That's a conversation for another day.
That's a deep
That's
conversation.
it is. It really, really is. But just for clarity, we're gonna talk about it that way. But I love to get in front of audiences, whether it be in front of human beings who are looking to, like me, discover what it is to be human. How do we build actual relationship? What does that look like? What does it feel like? What does it do inside of us? And I love, in all of my speeches, I love to use beautiful metaphors, and I use nature quite often because nature is an incredible and beautiful teacher. Whether I'm talking about dandelions or poison ivy or mycelium or trees, right? Or the galaxy, or a documentary about soil. Literally, these are all metaphors and discussions inside of my talks. The thing that I recognize is that curiosity is what got me to where I am today, to who I am and how I connect with the world around me. And it has allowed me to look at the world around me with fresh eyes continually. And this is how I got to dandelions being part of one of my talks, or poison ivy, because I was like, you know what? I think I know about this thing, right? And we can think about this in terms of our relationships. I think I know about this thing or about this person because I'm around them all the time. I see them all the time, but that doesn't mean we know, right? And so I've made this practice of finding out 3 things that I didn't previously know about someone or something, right? And so I go on these curiosity walks to develop and practice this. And that's where a lot of my metaphors come from. These long walks I go on, and I'm like, I'm going to Google this thing. And I learned 3 crazy things, and somehow it fits beautifully into a metaphor, into my talks. And I'm like, brilliant. I don't know anybody else who's putting poison ivy in their keynotes, but I am.
I love it. By the way, one of my favorite keynotes, she talks about basset hounds.
I love that.
She's
I love
obsessed
that.
with basset hounds, and her other thing is grits. She's from South Carolina, so she talks about
Okay.
basset hounds and grits. Her name's Jeannie Whitehouse, and her signature talk is called "Even a Nerd Can Be Heard." And
Yeah.
she's an accountant who helps accountants communicate.
Oh, I
And
love that.
I think what I would say, and I'm going to go on a little tangent here, but I love that you're bringing in the things you're curious about, because
Yeah.
if you're curious about it, the energy is going to be infectious to the audience.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, this is something I
Yeah.
think you do naturally, but I'm looking at your words curiosity, respect, and accountability. And honestly, I'm going to just say this, but isn't that the fundamental ingredients for a good relationship with yourself? And
Yes.
if you don't have those, how do you have that with other people?
Yes. And I love to clarify this with people to kind of break it down for people and make it really simple because I turned it into a formula. So to be an intentional and ethical leader or human requires, in parentheses, be curious plus be respectful. Times practicing accountability, right? And the reason is because curiosity without respect is intrusive, right? And respect without curiosity is uneducated. And accountability is what brings in that ethical piece where we understand, where we are invested in understanding the impact of our actions and taking responsibility about those things and then getting curious, right? So it brings us right back to the beginning and then getting curious and learning more so that we can do better and reduce our harm moving forward, right? And so it all just kind of feeds back into one another. But oftentimes I do find that people kind of get hung up on the accountability part and they think I mean punishment because our society is so carceral that oftentimes people think that's what I mean, and I don't. Taking responsibility for the impact of your actions can be as simple as, and by the way, it's very freeing when we do this. And I'll use an example from my own life. There was a couple that I had known from networking, still know them. And they, for whatever reason, none of my business, had to use or used a surrogate to have their son. And I knew this. And I saw them 2 weeks after their son was born at a gala. And the wife was there dressed beautifully. She looked amazing. And I was like, oh my God, you look so amazing. I can't believe you just had a baby 2 weeks ago. And I was like, oh my God. someone else birthed the child, Shana. Someone else birthed the child. And it wouldn't have been that bad. I could have cleaned it up right away
Yeah.
if it was just the three of us talking, but there was like five other people standing there going, oh my God, you just had a baby. So now I've put her in the position to explain to five people who it's none of their business
Oops.
or choose how she has to respond to this, that
Yeah.
she actually used a surrogate, right? And so that I didn't in the moment, because I didn't want to center myself in that moment any further than I already had messed it all up. So the next day I went to her and I said, I'm really, really sorry. I know better. You told me, and I should have taken a moment and thought about it before even though I was trying to compliment you, I put you in a really weird spot. And I'm very sorry for that. And I take responsibility for that. And it won't happen again moving forward. Now, did they respond? Oh my God, we didn't think anything of it. Yeah, they did. But do I know that they thought something about it? Maybe they didn't. Maybe it wasn't a huge deal. But when I think about what makes the most trustworthy relationships in my life, it's the people who are willing to dive into those uncomfortable moments, who are willing to take responsibility, right? And know that and just acknowledge that they have impacted me in a way that was uncomfortable, maybe a little hurtful. Even just those, and when we practice in those little moments, it becomes easier when we've got to take accountability in bigger moments because we've built up those muscles around that discomfort, right? And when I tell you that built a level of trust between me and them that exists to this day, a really beautiful level of trust and friendship that deepened so very quickly that wouldn't have otherwise, right? Because it's accountability that really anchors a relationship in trust, right? It really anchors that relationship. The respect too, right? And the curiosity is what kicks it off. The respect is what takes it to the next thing, but accountability is what really grounds it and gives it roots in life.
I love that. And that's the thing, it's funny when I look at my closest, dearest, most trusting relationships, it's not because everything's been perfect and we've never
Right,
disagreed.
right.
It's those moments where we've disagreed and went, oh, I'm
Uh-huh.
curious. Tell me more about that. Why do you
Yeah,
feel that way, or
yeah,
why is that? And people are always saying, "Oh, Jeff, you're very open-minded." It's just I know I'm not perfect, and I want
right,
other people. I give grace everywhere I can
right,
because if I need it, I'd like to think I'd get it back from somebody. So
right. Exactly. And that's the thing when we extend our own humanity and we accept the vulnerability that it is to be human, that's when we really truly connect to one another. And I think that's something that most of us were not raised to embrace that vulnerability. We were raised and recognized that like in order to climb this, very hierarchical society, we have to pretend we know it all. And that isn't serving any of us, right? So if we really want to get to a place where we feel truly connected and joyful and fulfilled, it's going to require a shift in the way that we understand what relationship really is.
but and I think I will say I can't pretend to understand what your childhood was like, but I do think that you and I having this conversation, I feel close to you, and I'm definitely very, very supportive of you. But I also know that there are things you don't want to share and there are things you want to share. And
Yeah.
I think that's something, honestly, every coworker, let's start with coworkers for a minute,
Mm,
but I feel like every coworker and every leader, if you recognize that there's some safe zones and there's some
yeah.
not so safe zones, and it's recognizing that, and I think one of the big things I think I'm unemployable because I hate the water cooler and the office gossip. Um, there's more curiosity and no respect and accountability. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, no, I think people forget the respect part, right? And so that's why I really emphasize to people, curiosity has to be balanced out by respect. That's where boundaries come in, right? And when we've crossed those boundaries, that's where accountability comes in, right? So that's why I specifically let people know that curiosity without respect is intrusive,
Yeah.
right? And when we think about an intruder, right, it's someone who has crossed a boundary, right? And so if we don't want to become the intruder in other people's lives, we have to get curious and we have to be willing to get curious to the point that we understand their boundaries, and understand that their boundaries are going to shift and move and change, just like ours are, as they learn and grow and show up in different ways in the world. And we have to, which is why we have to cultivate curiosity continually, right? It has to be a continual cultivation.
Love it. And for the record, my people are always curious. My favorite punctuation mark, and yes, I have a favorite. It's the
Okay.
question mark.
Ah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's
That's
the
such a,
brand of the curious, right?
yeah, I think that's an interesting question to ask people. Like, what's your favorite punctuation?
Don't get me
Might be so,
started
or
on
be
like
like, Grammarly will tell you mine's the comma.
mine is clearly the question mark. For the record, in my house, we also have debates about what's your favorite diagram. I personally love the Venn diagram. That's
I was going to say mine's the Venn diagram. I love
again, I feel like it's the neurodivergence diversity,
Yeah.
but
Well, it also Venn diagrams kind of remember. Do you remember those? What are they? They're like a spiral set where you'd like a pen and you'd have all these things that look like little plastic gears and they have different holes in them and you'd be able a spirograph. Is that what it's called?
pyrograph, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I still have one, guys. This is. I
They
mean,
still
I'm
sell them.
dating myself. Yeah, they do. They do because mine broke. I had one stored away in the garage and I was like, oh my God, I should pull this back out and do this with my niece. Blah blah. Also, like I'm like my niece, but really sometimes I just do it for
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
But then I was like, oh shoot, it broke. And so I got a whole new set just a couple of years ago and I keep it around because I'm like, it's one of those things where you could just kind of sit and think and create these weird
Yeah.
little doodles and they're kind of fun. I don't know.
There's something meditative about it. And my wife looks at
Yeah.
me and, she journals and she collects crystals and she does plants. And I'm like, I
Mm,
really feel because we saw one in a discount bin the other day. And I was like, man, I really think I should get that because I always
yeah.
wanted one when I was a kid. And,
Yeah.
it just seems meditative to sit and watch
It
the little
is.
things. Sorry,
Yeah.
total tangent. Now,
Right.
Shayna,
Total teacher. Now people know so much about guys, I'm almost 40. So like you're know random things about me in my millennial past.
why not? And
Why
and
not?
I think that's what makes it interesting. Now, if somebody is watching this and they've gotten to this point, they clearly like one of us, and it's probably you.
Sure.
So,
Maybe
um,
both. Let's
let's
both.
say both. Yes.
Both.
Now, if somebody wants to bring you in or wants to talk to you about speaking,
Sure.
where should we send them, or
Yeah.
how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So head to my website or you can email me. I'm sure my website will be and will be in the show notes. It is www.consonate.world, .world, not .com. Because we're trying to change the world here. Also, .com wasn't available. Um,
I feel like is that what's
Consonate, it's a real word. It's a real word.
really?
I'll bring it up on dictionary.com. I'll read it to you. It's a really beautiful definition. It's just a dead word. We don't use it anymore, but I'm seeking to bring it back. You know what I mean? Justin Timberlake brought sexy back. I'm bringing consonate back.
I love
Um,
it.
so it means to arrange or blend together skillfully as parts or elements put together in a harmonious, precisely appropriate or elegant manner.
Ooh.
I know, right? I know. When I found that word, it took me like a year and a half, almost 2 years to find that word. And I was like, that's it.
That's a
That's
beautiful. It suits you.
yeah.
Um, Full disclosure, Shayna, when I have trouble sleeping, I thought, what's the most boring subject on the planet? And everybody says it's Latin. So one night I couldn't sleep, so I got up and I was like, okay, I'm gonna study Latin. Uh, 4 hours later, I was like, oh my God, I'm addicted. And my wife's like, did you sleep last night? I'm like, nope.
No, that's neurodiversity for you, folks.
But once I got Latin in my head, oh my God, it's I have a
Yeah.
new playground. So
Yeah. So no, it's a beautiful word and I love it. And as soon as because that's really what ultimately I'm seeking to bring the world to is a place of harmony, a place of us understanding how to create a bubble of life together, right? That we operate as a part of. And so, yes, you can go to my website. Back to the question. You can go to my website or you could email me at shana@consonate.world. And And that's the best way. There's lots of information on my website. There's a tab about me as a speaker. There's lots of links to podcasts that I've been on, articles that I've written. There's so much information there, a little snippet of me as a speaker. There's also like free giveaway stuff on my workshops page. And I love to be invested. I'm deeply invested in the democratization of information. So all of my workshops, I have condensed down almost all of them at this point down to 45 minutes and offer them for $100 through my website. So for small business owners or entrepreneurs, that you still have access to the same information as I give to large corporations, just really, really condensed down.
Love it. Well, Shana, I want to thank you. Now, you're the expert at you. Before we wrap up, is there anything I should have asked you that I haven't?
No, I don't think so. I
We
think we
had
covered all the bases.
neurodivergent.
We did. It's a very neurodivergent conversation. I hope people were deeply entertained.
They're not our people, and that's okay. So for anybody
That's
who
okay.
made it to the end, congratulations.
Yeah, you are probably our people.
Yeah. And for the record, I know a bunch of neurodiverse entrepreneurs. I will make some connections for you
Oh, I'd
because
love that. Thank you.
once you start to connect with other people who are used to being different and on the outside, it's amazing because, somebody said it well. They said, we're the island of misfit toys
Oh, for
and we
sure.
all find each other. So
Yeah. No, I that used to be my favorite Christmas movie. And when they would get to the part, and I'd be like, but that's me. I'm the Charlie in the box. Yeah.
yeah. Well, well, Shada, thank you for hanging out with me and thank you for being on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Jeff.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our show. We hope that you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to either click the link below or scan the QR code to register and listen to other episodes of our podcast. Or if you think your business or you would be a great guest to be on our show, we're always looking for experts in one of the 9 elements of holistic wellness. We'd love to have you. You can either click the link below or you can scan the QR code and complete our speaker intake form. Thank you, and to your wellness.